Computer. Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Marichelle Vaught, and I'm a program director with the Community of Vermont Elders. And if you aren't familiar with the Community of Vermont Elders, we are a nonprofit organization, and we've been around since the beginning of the 80s. Our work is really focused on creating a world without ageism. And we want people to embrace aging and to age safely and to know what to expect as we age. And we do this through connecting, educating, and empowering. So we connect folks through programs such as this. So even though we can't be together in person, we can take advantage of the technical world and forget about COVID for a little bit and bring some enriching programming to you, such as this. Or we've offered programming such as storytelling or poetry, or virtual photography exhibits. We educate through our programs where we talk about protecting yourself against scams, frauds, and financial exploitation, and Medicare fraud, abuse, and errors. And we empower by encouraging people by being a voice to lawmakers on issues that affect them through our global program. And these are just a few of the things that COVE does, the Community of Vermont Elders. So you can also learn more about what we're up to at our website, which is vermontelders.org. And we always want to bring you the important information you need, but we also want to keep you connected to your community and to your peers. And a shout out to, we have a lot of folks here from Bugby Senior Center and Thompson Senior Center, readers of the Montpelier Bridge. Woohoo! I used to work for Montpelier Bridge during the Nat Frothingham years. So it's great to have so many people here, and of course a lot of our COVE members. So a couple of housekeeping things. So during the presentation, we find it best that it's good to keep muted so everybody can hear the speaker. And also, everybody, we all know technology and internet connection is iffy for everybody. And I've learned that if you keep your video off, that helps keep your connection not as choppy, so that when the presenter is showing their screen and sharing photographs, nothing freezes as much. And so also, you can also put your view on the top right on speaker view. So that way you can just see the speaker. And then on the bottom, at any point during the presentation, feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to make comments, ask questions, engage, you know, we'll take questions after the presentation, or I'll be monitoring the chat box as well. So we definitely like to hear comments throughout the program as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our special guest of today's COVE presentation, Helen Hossley. Helen Hossley was a National Park Ranger for 4 years. She lived in Burlington, Vermont for 25 years, where she and her husband raised their children. Her children are exploring their own dreams while residing in Texas. Helen currently lives with her husband, John, in Ruskin, Florida. Over the years, she has used her talents to work with companies and organizations that have a social mission. She has helped reduce energy use on dairy farms. She has also spearheaded construction of playgrounds and upgrades to energy efficiency in the Burlington Public Schools. Helen created an armchair hike through the Grand Canyon as a way of bringing the beauty of the American Southwest to others who dream of visiting or simply would enjoy hearing about our beautiful national landmarks. So we're about to go on a wonderful adventure with Helen. And afterwards, for those of you who opted in on the raffle, I have all of your names in this box. So we'll draw 10 names afterwards, and the 10 names will win a a signed copy of Helen's book. Do I get to wear that neat hat? So that'll be after the presentation. So let's go on mute. And Kathy says, I guess she got to wear the hat. Take it away, Helen.
Thank you, Marichelle. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Cove, for sponsoring this event. It has been a wonderful trip down memory lane for me. So I was a national park ranger from 1990 to just about 1995, so about 4.5 years. And my first assignment was at Glen Canyon Recreation Area, also known as Lake Powell.
Oh yeah.
And yes, it was my background was in restaurant management. And while I was traveling with my friend Ginger, we threw caution to the wind when we were in our early to mid 20s and said, you know, we're not in the jobs that we love, and we really do want to ski in the Rocky Mountains. So we quit our jobs and put skis on top of our car and traveled across the country and zigzagged down the Rocky Mountains and skied all the beautiful places from Banff, Canada down to Taos, New Mexico. But while I was in Yellowstone, West Yellowstone, visiting a friend of Ginger's, his name is Arden, and he is a geologist in Yellowstone in the summer, but he runs a cross-country ski expedition, and it's still there, called Yellowstone Expeditions. And you spend a week at the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, just skiing through some fantastic landmarks and exquisite scenery and everything that Yellowstone has to offer. And in January of 1990, he says, oh, I need to apply for my summer position with the parks. I have an extra application here. Why don't you fill it out? So I really had a lot of time in my hands, and I filled out this 10-page application, sent it into Washington, D.C., didn't think twice about it. And then in April of that year, I call my weekly call home, because it was before cell phones. And my mother was all excited. She goes, there's this guy, Dan, and he wants to give you a job. I'm like, what? I'm traveling. What do you mean? Totally forgot I applied for this position. And it just so happens that Glen Canyon called me, as well as the other park I put down at the time, which was Sequoia Kings Canyon. And I accepted Glen Canyon first before Sequoia called me. So I ended up at Lake Powell. So without further ado, I will jump into our armchair hike from Lake Powell down through Lee's Ferry into the Grand Canyon and ending up at the Havasupai Indian Reservation at the beautiful Havasupai Falls. And I'm happy to, Marichelle's going to monitor the chat. So if you have questions as we go, please let me know. So let's see, I think this is what I want. Okay.
Last one never had a problem.
Okay. So can you all see my screen? It says disclaimer. Yeah. Okay. So the disclaimer is basically saying a lot of these pictures are mine, and they're circa 1990. So this means that they don't necessarily have the same quality as you would expect from today's photos. So just keep that in mind as we go through. And,
let's see.
And so let me see, why am I not advancing? We'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Let's see here. There we go. So whenever I start out on an expedition, I always like to reference a map and see if we can move this over here. There, is that better? Everybody can see just now the presentation. So where we're heading is the American Southwest. And as you can see, this is on the far left side, California, and it goes over to New Mexico, Colorado. But we're going to concentrate in this area called Northern Arizona. And more specifically, we're going to be going from Page, as I said, down the Colorado River, through the Grand Canyon National Park, and then ending up at the Havasupai Indian Reservation. And the Grand Canyon actually runs from Lee's Ferry down through Grand Canyon National Park and ends up down at Lake Mead. So there's a whole lot more to the Grand Canyon than just Grand Canyon National Park. But we're just going to concentrate on that area for today. And with any good hike, we need to bring your essentials for the day hikes. And in the American Southwest, it's water, water, and more water. It's recommended that you carry at least 1 gallon of water per person per day. And you shouldn't have any problems. But just having recently visited Arizona this past fall, when the temperatures were 120 degrees, I would almost say you need at least 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons just to stay hydrated, because it is getting hotter in the American Southwest. So starting with Lake Powell, a little bit of history about that is actually the gentleman on the left you see is actually John Wesley Powell and his Indian guide. Now, John Wesley Powell was a major in the Civil War. He was for the Union Army. He actually lost an arm during battle. And after the war, he became an employee for the US Geological Service. And he mapped the Colorado River through what was then called, it didn't really have a name. He's the one that dubbed it Glen Canyon, because of all the little eddies and side canyons that were just teeming with life and trees and very beautiful. So he called it Glen Canyon. And then he and his team of 12 actually took wooden boats and went through the rapids and mapped the Colorado for the US Geological Service. He did that in 1869. And his 12 people, at one point during the trip, they were midway through their trip into the heart of the Grand Canyon, and 6 of his crew were discouraged, and they decided they wanted to hike out of the canyon. And then the other 6 remained. The 6 that remained with John Wesley Powell ended up surviving, and the other 6 were never found again. So what created Glen Canyon National Recreation Area was basically the creation of the dam and the bridge. And the dam was actually created as a water storage for the Colorado Plateau. And the bridge was created in 1959 to accommodate the transportation of materials to build the Glen Canyon Dam. And the total cost of the materials was of the dam was approximately $5 million. And so what they did to construct the bridge is they had 2 cableway towers that were built on either side of the canyon rim about 1,500 feet apart. And then the sections of the bridge were lowered into place and then held back by steel ties until the 2 sides of the arch would finally rest on each other high over the Colorado. So the height of that bridge is 700 feet. And then that spans a little more than 1,000 feet. And as I said, it was dedicated in 1959. And then it was the last link of US Highway 89 that runs through Arizona and up into Utah. And the dam itself started construction a little before 1959. It was started in 1956, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But if you notice on this particular picture, and you see these brown or black spotches on the Navajo sandstone, that's the name of this rock formation. The reason why it was chosen to have the dam put here is that it was a very consistent rock that the engineers could drill into without it splintering. It was also one of the narrowest sections of the Grand Canyon of the Colorado River for hundreds of miles. And so it just made an ideal location. And what you see as far this is called desert varnish. And it's basically the oxidation of iron and manganese. So you'll see that it really has a very pronounced impact on the area. It's just very beautiful when it's finished. What you see up here in the, upper left-hand corner, that's part of the observation room. That's part of Glen Canyon Visitor Center. So the dam itself is one of the largest, holds one of the largest reservoirs called Lake Powell. It's within the United States. It has over 1,900 miles of shoreline, and the construction of the dam began in 1956 and ended in 1963.
Yep.
And now, if anybody has read The Monkey Ranch Gang by Edward Abbey, this was the focus of his book, was actually blowing up Glen Canyon Dam, because prior to the dam being built and the river being backed up to create the lake, there was really, the area wasn't really fully explored. And they were concerned of the ecological damage that putting a dam there would have. And unfortunately, the environmentalists were not successful in stopping the dam itself. The Carl Hayden Visitor Center, as I mentioned, is the visitor center just on the east side of the bridge, and it's named after Carl Hayden, who was the U.S. senator from Arizona, and he was one of the first U.S. senators to serve a seven terms in Congress. And obviously, now there's been several of our congressmen or senators have served similar to that. I think Patrick Leahy might be one of them. The dam itself is quite hefty. This is a picture of the generators within the plant. And as you can see, it generates over 1 million kilowatts. And the energy that is produced goes downstream, that it provides power to rural electric co-ops, Native American reservations, government facilities, and towns throughout Utah, Colorado, and Arizona, and New Mexico. And as I said before, the dam provides critical water storage from their upper basin in the states of the Colorado Plateau, but also guarantees that the lower basin will receive their allocated water supply. And if you've traveled out west, you know that water is king out there. And there are so many laws regarding the use of water, it's mind-boggling. But the water supply that goes downstream, the majority of it is used in agricultural operations. So you can thank Glen Canyon Dam for your strawberries and avocados that you have on your thing. Now, the dam has 2 huge spillways and 8 of these penstocks, they call them. And they actually allow for obviously a large release of water, and they're not always operational. Think about every 10 years, the Bureau of Reclamation, who actually runs the dam, will release water like this that you see in the lower right-hand corner. And that is actually to help restore the silt that gets lost by the Colorado being dammed up. And it helps restore the silt downstream in the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. So the spillways are 41 feet in diameter, and they have the capacity to expel over 100,000 cubic feet of water per second. So it's kind of like mind-boggling how big these things are. Now, as I said before, Lake Powell is the 2nd largest reservoir in North America. It's 186 miles long, and you can see how much shoreline it has, and it holds approximately 27 million acre feet of water. Now, if to get a picture of this, if any of those who traveled on the eastern coast, it's like putting Glen Canyon Dam at Washington, D.C. and having the lake back up all the way to New York City. That's how long this lake is. And the 27 million acre feet, the acre foot is really to help you understand this. An acre foot is defined as 66 feet by 660 feet by 1 foot deep. And that basically 1 acre foot equals about 326,000 gallons of water. So it took, 27 million acre feet, you can do the math. Maybe Jim will do it later. But Lake Powell took 18 years to fill to full pool. And the first time it was at full pool was 1980. And it hasn't really been at full pool much since then. If you visit Lake Powell today, you will see that there's a bathtub ring that's around Lake Powell, but it's doing exactly as the lake and the storage capacity was meant to do. It provides water for the upper and the lower basin of the Colorado River. But in addition to it being a water storage pool, if you will. It's actually a beautiful recreation area. As you can see by the red rocks that are here, people rent houseboats for weeks at a time, and they go and they explore the 1900 miles of shoreline if they can get a chance to do so. And they're everything from the smaller houseboat here to the large, luxurious houseboats that you can rent. It's really phenomenal. And I think now the visitation to Lake Powell is close to 2.5 million people a year, which is quite a bit. So in addition to the recreation on the lake, there are other things to visit while you're there. We have, which is Rainbow Bridge National Monument. It was actually Theodore Roosevelt who made it a national monument in 1910. And as you can read here, the sandstone structure, it's a bridge as opposed to an arch, because it was made by water running underneath it as opposed to wind going through it. And it stands just about 300 feet high and spans 234 feet. And if you look right here, these are people. So you can kind of get a sense of how massive this bridge is. And to reach this particular arch, you have two options. Option one is to take a 2-hour boat ride from Wawawee Marina, which is down by the visitor center, and travel up lake. And you need to get a permit from the Navajo Nation, because this particular landmark is on the Navajo Nation. Or you can hike to it. And hiking to it is challenging because it's on the Navajo reservation. You have to get permission. You need to know where you're going because there are absolutely no signs whatsoever. And I attempted to hike to this bridge when I was a ranger. And in my book, there's a chapter called Donkey Dung and the Trail to Life. It was basically an explanation of how I attempted to get to this bridge, but ultimately ended up following Donkey Dung down this rocky ledge in order to get to a house within the Navajo reservation to get a ride back to civilization, because I never could find the trailhead. And I basically was lost with 2 other people for about a day and a half in the desert. So, but I would have loved to have visited Rainbow Bridge, just never had a chance to do it.
Wow.
When Helen? You are, yes?
I was going to ask, did a lot of people get lost there besides you?
Only people who think that are rangers that think they know what they're doing.
Oh my goodness.
Well, the thing is with the Navajo Nation and Navajo people, when we stop to ask, we find, first of all, you're looking through, just imagine just this barren desert, really. Well, a lot of sagebrush, but it's not like buildings are evident on the Navajo Nation. They are pretty tucked away underneath trees and stuff. So even when we were up on Navajo Mountain looking down, we couldn't see a tree for miles. Or we couldn't see a house for miles. So we're like, oh my God, there's no civilization. And we're just going to have to hike back out 20 miles. And we only have water for, we only have a half a gallon of water for 3 of us. Oh, it was just getting a little scary. And so when we stopped to ask for directions initially, we ran into 3 Navajo men. And, here's this white woman that is very clearly out of her element. And they just spoke Navajo to me. They knew English, but they chose to play with my mind and spoke Navajo until finally I just said in exasperation, I said, I really apologize for being here and not knowing what I'm doing, but could you please tell me how to get to the trailhead? Which I thought they did, but I ended up not going there. So anyway, it was an interesting story, and I obviously lived to tell the story.
Wow.
Some other places that you can travel is Forgotten Canyon, which is up lake, and that's about a 3.5-hour boat ride from Wawawee Marina. And what's unique about this is the drawings on the wall, as well as there is a ruin here. It's called Defiance House. And if you looked at, this, you think that this is just one straight wall, but when you get there, and you look up, it's actually almost like a 30-degree angle of that roof of this rock ledge. And it's like, how did this person, or how did these people get up that high and make, and these particular drawings, that was about 50 feet tall, believe it or not. Whoa. And so it's actually, and I asked, is it a pictograph or a petroglyph? And it's actually a pictograph, because of the fact that it's actually drawn on as opposed to carved into the area. But it's a popular destination for people who are vacationing on Lake Powell. And you can see this is the Defiance House. And if you went to the far right of this picture and you looked up the canyon, you'd have a clear view of if there was any threats coming your way, and actually the same for the left. So Antelope Canyon, also known as Swamp Canyon, that's also on the Navajo Reservation, but you've probably seen the bazillion pictures of this beautiful landmark. You have to know what you're doing. You need to get permission. And you also have to, now I think the Navajo people are organized enough that they lead tours, which is wonderful, because it's a little more safe. When I did it, it was actually, imagine you're just walking along the desert, and all of a sudden there's this crack in the earth that just starts opening up. And that's Antelope Canyon. And it's made by a tributary of the Colorado. And when you have storms, it floods. And if you're not paying attention, could have stormed the day before or 2 hours before, and you could have a flash flood, and you could find yourself in a very dangerous situation. But the rewards are beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go there, the rocks formations are just absolutely gorgeous. So carrying on, we're going to go down to Lee's Ferry. We're kind of go a little quickly, because I see I'm talking a lot, and we're not even to Grand Canyon yet. But Lee's Ferry, when you take the boat trip from Page down to Lee's Ferry, and that's a demarcation of the Grand Canyon. So Grand Canyon National Park starts at Lee's Ferry, goes up that way. But when you're taking the 12-mile float trip, there are petroglyphs that are along the way. It's also well known for its trout fishing, rainbow trout fishing, because the water at Glen Canyon Dam is released from 500 feet. And so the water is very cold, and it makes excellent trout fishing. So it's been stocked, and it's been known for its world-class trout fishing. And when you're at Lee's Ferry, there's a number of things that you can do. There's Cathedral Wash hike, and then there's Spencer Trail. And I wanted to do a Spencer Trail hike, because what that is actually going up on a plateau, and you can look back at Glen Canyon Dam once you get to the top. But I was doing this in August, and it was very hot. And I started out early in the morning, like, I don't know, 6 o'clock to get there. And so what looks like a very flat line on a piece of paper actually looks like this when you get up on the plateau. So I took that picture before I started back down, because by 9 in the morning, I was running out of water. I was getting a little heat exhaustion and almost faint. So I said, I better get back down and find some water source. And before I went back down, I took this picture. Now, this area is where every single boat rafting trip that goes through the Grand Canyon National Park, they put in here and go downstream to Grand Canyon National Park. Yeah. Other things at Lee's Ferry, this used to be part of the post office building in the 1920s, and it was abandoned. And also Lee's Ferry was known for John Lee, who was a Mormon, and he settled with his wife at Lonely Dell Ranch. And there was also a steamboat named the Charles Spencer that would be used to transport coal, because the Colorado Plateau, where Glen Canyon is actually very clean burning coal. The Navajo Reservation has a huge generating plant in addition to the dam, which is like within 5 miles of the dam. And so anyway, it was used to, this steamboat was used to transport coal. It was in operation for 1 year before it was abandoned, because it actually burned more coal than it could haul to actually make itself move. So after 1 year of trying to keep this thing afloat, they just let it rot in the middle of the river. And that's what the remains are now. So moving on to Grand Canyon National Park, we're actually gonna, there are two rims, the north and south rim. South rim is where a lot of people, most of the people go, because it's easily connected to the rest of Arizona. The north rim is a little bit longer drive because obviously you can't, there's no bridge across the Grand Canyon. And so the north rim has about an elevation of 8,000 feet, gets a lot of snow in the wintertime, and it's closed from late October to mid-March. And the south rim is open year round. That is about 7,000 feet, but it still remains open because it doesn't get as frequent as snowstorms. And if I had to pick my rim that is my favorite, I would have to say it's the north rim. And the best times to travel and to explore that area, as you can see here, late March through May or September. Try to avoid it in the summertime, but the majority of the people actually do visit the Grand Canyon National Park in the summer. And I think their visitation is up around 6 million people per year. And the average length of time that people spend at the Grand Canyon is about 2 hours. Crazy, I know. I just so happened was at Grand Canyon this fall, and I took that picture in November. Very beautiful. But here's Ginger and I, our trip down the Kaibab Trail. We hiked down every time you go backcountry with any national park, you need to get a backcountry camping permit. And your permits, you need to apply for anywhere between 12 to 18 months in advance. Or if you're lucky enough, whoever reserved that 12 or 18 months is unable to attend, the Park Service releases them. And then those who are just waiting for a permit to open up, you can nab one in a matter of an hour or two, just waiting at the backcountry office. And that's what Ginger and I did. We waited until something opened up and we're able to get a 2-night backcountry permit. So we hiked down the Kaibab Trail, which is about 7 miles to the river. And this is what the trail looks like. Very well maintained, beautiful vistas all along the way. And when the first time you see the river, you're very excited because you're hiking for about 5 miles, and all of a sudden, rather than just looking at rocks and rocks and more rocks, you now see, oh my God, there's the river. Isn't that great? The end is in sight. And then there's a bridge that was created in the 1920s. And it was created by the Fred Harvey Corporation, which is still in existence today at Grand Canyon. And there are two places to stay. One is at the Bright Angel Campground, and the other is Phantom Ranch. Now the campground is where we stayed because we were camping and we didn't have the funds to stay at Phantom Ranch when we were just poor, lonely travelers. But Phantom Ranch was completed in 1920 by the Fred Harvey Company. And it initially consisted of a dining hall and a central kitchen and then 3 cabins. And it was made mostly for tourist exploration down into the canyon. And during the Great Depression, the CCC made several upgrades to the ranch, including indoor plumbing and sewage systems and a 35-foot by 70-foot pond-shaped swimming pool. So it's like there are no expenses spared. Phantom Ranch currently is closed due to COVID, but usually reservations at the ranch need to be made about 18 months in advance. But these are the beautiful historic buildings that I just think they're exquisite. And they're made by materials, obviously, that are found in the canyon. And it was easier to construct rather than bringing stuff down into the canyon. So once you explore your area down at the river level, you then now need to hike back out of the canyon. And so Ginger and I went down Kaibab Trail, and we're going to go back up Bright Angel Trail. Now, Bright Angel Trail you have the option of going to the North Rim or the South Rim on Bright Angel Trail. And people, when they do a rim to rim hike, that means they start at the North Rim and they hike all the way down the Bright Angel Trail to the river and then back up Bright Angel to the south, or vice versa. And that's about a 25-mile hike. takes at least 2 or 3 days, depending how fast you walk.
We went.
But what you do is, what Ginger and I did, and a lot of people do, is they split your 10-mile hike up Bright Angel Trail into 2 days. The first one is you stop at and you hike up Indian Garden. So you're hiking out of the canyon down here in the bowels of the canyon and across this plateau. And then this is Indian Garden. So that's about 5 miles from the river. And then after you stay at Indian Garden, then this is the next part of your day, is hiking up the switchbacks. And yes, I took that picture. So that's always very exciting to see the trails that way. Jim asked earlier about the mules, and the mule trains have been in existence for a long time. I have to say, as someone who was hiking out of the Grand Canyon, I found the mules very disconcerting because they're so well trained, they know what they're doing, but you have to give them the right of way. And so that means you're standing canyon side while they're against the wall. So if the rider freaks out and then freaks out the mule, it's dangerous for you, but you have to stand stock still as they're driving by or riding by. I found, and then the riders have these metal switches to, encourage the mules to keep going. And usually they're not paying attention to the hiker. And so those metal switches were at or eye level. Like, it was just very scary. It's like, okay, guys, just keep moving. So for those who want to and can take a mule down, I would highly recommend hiking. It's safer. And then on the North Rim, a little bit different flora and fauna. We have Indian paintbrush, which is beautiful. And at the 8,000 foot level, we also have the beginning of the ponderosa pines, which are absolutely exquisite, but this is not a ponderosa pine. It's actually a century plant. And this picture is on the North Rim looking northeast into Lee's Ferry. So if you just follow this canyon all the way up, you would eventually land at Lee's Ferry. And this is Window Rock. Actually, I took this picture just because it was cool. I could see, here's the river. I'm like, wow, you can see the river from here. And apparently that's a famous landmark within the North Rim. I didn't even realize that. But you have some very different vistas because the elevation is at 8,000 feet. You're actually looking down onto the South Rim. And then you have the San Francisco peaks that are in Flagstaff, which are about 50 miles away. So you have some incredible visibility at the Grand Canyon. And there's actually a number of companies they monitor the air quality of the Grand Canyon all the time. And so a lot of the air pollution obviously comes from the Western cities of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Vegas, that type of thing. Just thought I'd throw that in there, say, yep, I actually did hike at the Grand Canyon. But what I did is because I worked at Glen Canyon, on my days off, I call them busman holidays. I would usually visit a national park in the area. And because the Grand Canyon was in such close proximity to Glen Canyon, I visited the North Rim quite a bit. And one time I wanted to visit the North Rim and see the sunset over the South Rim. And I spent a lot of time that day just walking along the rim, and I wasn't paying attention to the time, but I got a backcountry permit and I was camping by myself along this one trail. And just as the sun was setting, I had enough time to pitch my tent. And then I was sitting there with my little bowl of rice and chicken. And I hear this helicopter and I said, oh, wouldn't this be really cool if I could wave to them? And at the same time, I was thinking, I really would like a beer, but I didn't bring it because I didn't have any way to keep it cold. And then within a minute or two, I see the helicopter, and they were close enough that I could wave, and I could see the gentleman, the pilot. And then they flew by me, and then I heard them turn around and they started coming back towards me. And then they hovered over me. And if anybody had an experience of a helicopter hovering about 30 feet above your head, it's very loud. very loud. And so then they started yelling at me, and I didn't know what they were saying. It was like, I'm like, what? And they would repeat themselves, and I'm thinking, no, I don't. I was thinking, it's not illegal to have beer, and no, I don't have any beer. And then they said it again. And I said, oh, well, finally, after about 3 minutes, or not even that long, but 3 times, I finally said, oh, they're telling me I'm not supposed to be here. So I ran to my tent and got my backcountry permit and held it up to them, and then they flew away. So they were just making sure that I had my backcountry permit in order to be there. But I was just enough time to snap this picture of the sun setting. Not totally the experience I was expecting, but it was kind of a funny story out of it. So we're going to leave the Grand Canyon National Park and go into another beautiful area called the Havasupai Indian Reservation. So the Wallapai and the Havasupai. So the Wallapai, if you ever see pictures of that bridge that has a glass bottom, or maybe it's not even a bridge, it's kind of like a walkway that juts out over the Grand Canyon, that's the Wallapai. They're closer to Lake Mead. And if you are brave enough to go and spend $25 and walk out and see nothing but glass in the Grand Canyon beneath you, God love you, that's wonderful. But Havasupai have these beautiful, they're known for their waterfalls and the turquoise pools. And you have very limited options on how to get there. You absolutely have to make your reservations about a year in advance at minimum. You need to be patient because they don't really have good internet access, and they really don't answer their phone. So you just have to continue to call until somebody answers. And this is still true to today because I tried, about 6 months ago or so. And if you don't make campground reservations and you just show up, then they're just going to charge you and say, okay, I didn't make reservations, but you're going to pay for it. And you have 3 choices to get down there. You can hike, take a horseback, or do a helicopter. And like I said, there's 2 options there. You can camp or you can be in the Havasupai Lodge. Ginger and I did a reunion hike in 2007, and we chose to stay at the Havasupai Lodge. But prior to that, you have to, let me just back up a minute. So you have Seligman, Arizona, right on Route 66, actually. So we stayed in Seligman, Arizona, and at historic Route 66. And it's about an hour from the trailhead. And when you get to the trailhead, there's Ginger and I getting ready. You have to start out early. We got there I think this picture was taken probably at 7:30 in the morning because it gets really hot. This was in September. And this was the trail that goes down across this plateau and then down through this valley. It's an 8-mile hike. The hardest part of the hike is the very first part. So consequently, coming back out of the canyon, the hardest part of the hike is the very last part because you're going up the switchbacks. So this is the switchback. Those are hikers coming down, and just switches back and forth. There's more hikers. So they're coming down, and then we're eventually going to get down to this trail here. And if you want to take a train, everything for the Havasupai people is packed in and packed out. They'll pack out their trash, they pack in their food. Everything is by horseback. And they use those same horses if you choose to ride horseback down into the canyon. And I don't know if I would be brave enough to ride a horseback down into, I'd rather hike in. If the horses die along the trail, they burn them. It's like, okay, they don't have, the equipment to haul the horse out, nor the equipment to bury it because it's all rock. So they just burn it on the trail. So this is Ginger walking down through the trail. And as you can see, between this trail and then the trail on the right-hand side of this picture is at Grand Canyon National Park, and see how beautifully maintained it is. And so these are the trail conditions at the Havasupai Reservation. There's absolutely no trail maintenance whatsoever. And you're walking in very rocky, very unstable land the whole 8 miles that you're walking. And then at the closer you get to the reservation, you're then walking in beach sand. So after 6 hours of hiking, and you're watching your step because of all the rocks, now you're walking on beach sand that's 2 or 3 inches deep. And by the end of the day, your calves are just barking at you because it's just so grueling on your legs. But along the way, you get some pretty cool rock formations that you can look at in desert varnish. You got a little camel right here. So kind of play games with yourself as you walk, otherwise it gets kind of boring. But as you get into the canyon and you start seeing the trees, you're like, yay, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. And this is the reservation. I was actually a little taken aback by the housing that the Havasupai live in. They're mostly double wide trailers. So those were all helicoptered in at some point for their community. I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting a little more like the Navajo reservation, where they actually still have hogans and they live mostly a lot in hogans. But this is the community center, and this was their sandwich shop, I guess, for lack of a better term. And but this is the lodge that we stayed in. The lodge was beautiful. And they had a off to this side, they had a beautiful deck in the back, and up back here, they had another nice, beautiful deck. And so after a day of exploring the waterfalls and swimming in the pools, you just kind of come back and kick back and have some wonderful, wonderful conversation with the people who are there.
Pretty green there, isn't
it? Yeah. So the 5 waterfalls. This one is really famous, the Havasupai Falls. It's approximately a 100-foot drop. And so the picture on the left is actually, I was standing up on the cliff right here, which there's actually a sign, believe it or not, you can't really see it, but there's a sign that says, no jumping. I was like, whoever is wild and crazy enough to jump is, crazy enough to jump. You can get some very beautiful pictures. And so this is taken once again from that spot I was showing you, looking down as the waterfall goes down and then meanders down through here to the next falls, which is Mooney Falls. But there is a campground. This is the campground that I was referring to. And had I known the campground was so, actually very pretty and very well maintained, I probably would have camped instead of stayed in the lodge, but that's for another time. And this campground was actually flooded in 2008, just when there was a massive flood that went through the area. I don't think anybody died. So Mooney Falls was the next falls, which is probably about 15 or 20-minute hike from Havasupai Falls. And there's Ginger and I just, having, I guess somebody obviously took our picture. And this is standing on the edge of Mooney Falls over here, looking down into that. And so then the falls come down and there's a lot of pools here, and then there's a lot of pools down here. And then this continues down through to Beaver Falls, which is about 5 miles from Mooney Falls. And to get to Mooney Falls, you have to go through this tunnel, which is basically big enough for a person to fit through. And Mooney Falls was named after, let me just go back and I'll see. It was named after a 19th century miner who fell to his death. And then since then, 2 tunnels and steps were carved into and spikes were driven into the rocks for handholds. So there was a safer descent. So it's like, yeah, not much safer. Let me tell you, it was very scary going through the tunnel, mostly because I didn't realize how claustrophobic I was until I realized I had to go through there in order to get to Mooney Falls. But Ginger went through it, no problem. She's just like, what's your problem, Helen? I was like, oh, I don't want to die. So
Canyon hike are real about it.
What's that?
What time does it start?
Those are great pictures.
Thank you. So, so these people are they're actually, it's so steep. So Ginger was standing like right here when I took her picture, because the tunnel, see this guy standing right here? Or actually the tunnel's back here. So you have to walk a little bit. So Ginger was here, and this guy. These are the steps, and there's handholds. And these people are coming down instead of going up, because it was so steep. That's the only way you could do is come down backwards. And then see this ladder? It puts a lot of confidence in you, knowing that that ladder has been there for I don't know how many years, being deteriorated by the sun and the heat of the Arizona desert. But we made it down. Oops, sorry. And there's the handholds that you see, and then the steps. It's quite the adventure getting down to Mooney Falls, but it's well worth it, because this is how beautiful it is when you get down there. And you can swim in the pools that are here, and they're just delightful, because it's a constant like 70 some degrees, and just refreshing, because you know it's still in September, it's 80 or 90 degrees in the canyon. And these pools are absolutely beautiful and fun. And as you can see, it's almost like we had the place to ourselves, which was really great. And more of the Mooney Falls. The Beaver Falls, which I said is about 4 miles from Mooney Falls, we just did not have the energy to hike. You know, it would be another 8 miles, it'd be 4 miles down, 4 miles back. And we decided that maybe that would be another trip. The Navajo Falls is what we actually ended up going to after Mooney Falls, which are these gorgeous, it was a beautiful waterfall. So you had this here was a huge pool, and we were the only ones there. It was heaven on earth. And we must have stayed there about an hour, just swimming and enjoying, frolicking in this beautiful scenery, because there's this great red rocks behind you. Just really beautiful. However, as I said, as this indicates, the flood of 2008 destroyed this particular waterfall. And so this is what the new Navajo Falls look like. Huh. So they're a little bit taller, definitely not as robust. And so these are people you can see right here. So you can get a perspective of how big these falls are. And then the last fall in the Havasupai Reservation is this rock fall, which we never were able to find. We probably didn't, there isn't a lot of signage on the reservation, so you kind of have to know where you're going. But it would have been fun to swim there. We just didn't get a chance to. So I probably ran a little over, and I hope I gave you a sense of how beautiful it is, and hopefully inspired you at least to travel more virtually, if not in person, to these beautiful places.
Wow, that was wonderful. Oh,
thank you.
Oh my goodness, the pictures kept getting better and better and better, and I kept going, wow, wow.
Right. Well, you know, with technology too, it's like, so in 2007 we actually had digital technology then, so the pictures did become a lot better.
Well, just to see the landscape. You know, we're so used to the landscape here, but to see the landscape of the Grand Canyon, and then the history, to see the history of the West too, it's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your photos and your story and the history. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? Feel free to put your video on and go and unmute yourselves. You can put your view on gallery view, so you can see everybody who...
I just want to say the maps helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Big help.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. This is Joni. You just amazed me how you could hike in that blistering heat. Because I've been to the Four Corners, and I stayed in Canyon de Chelly with a Navajo friend.
Oh, nice.
In the heat.
Yeah.
Was way more than people think. You know, they say, oh, dry heat's better. Oh my God, nope. And water is not enough. I needed electrolytes. And when I finally did the electrolytes, I was much better. But did they have hot air balloons that go over the canyon?
No, actually, there's some very strict flight restrictions over Grand Canyon. They used to have helicopters that would fly inside the rim, and it just became too hazardous. So now I think the only helicopters that fly in there are Park Service helicopters, and there are some small aircraft, but they fly well away from but enough for you to get an experience of the canyon from the air, but not in the canyon like they used to.
Oh, it's a fantasy. I always wanted to go over the Grand Canyon in a hot air balloon. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Miriam Greenwald. Does Miriam Greenwald want to say something?
I'd like to thank you for the memories. My husband and I did similar trip many years ago. And wow, your pictures are unbelievable. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad that it brought back wonderful memories. It's always nice to hear.
Thank you. The hikes looked a little too challenging for me. How much do you have to know to ride a burro?
Not much, actually, because they're so well trained. And they're, the average person, like I said, they spend about 2 hours at the Grand Canyon because they're on the South Rim. And but with the burros, they just know their way. They train them for years, and they're bred specifically for the Grand Canyon. And so you don't really need to know a whole lot. My question is, how sore would you be at the end of the day?
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I assume they bounce.
Yeah, they do, and they go all the way down to Phantom Ranch. So, and a lot of them, you have the trip down. You do a lunch or a dinner. Usually, I think a late lunch, and then you come back out the same day. Yeah, but it would be a beautiful. It's beautiful. Just it is brutal. Like I said, I was there from August to November of this year, and from August to mid October, it was 100 and over triple digits, 120, 115. It was brutal.
Wow.
Thank you.
So we did go up to the canyon just to get, it dropped down to 70s. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the temperature range, like day into night?
Sure. So it depends on the time of year, but so when you're on the north or south rim, because you're at such elevation, the South Rim, you can have like in the 80s at the rim. And then as you hike down into the canyon, it can get well over triple digits. And the same conversely in the wintertime, it could get below zero, especially with the wind chill, and then get into the 30s and 40s at Riverside. But for every 1,000 feet you go in elevation, it's a 10-degree difference.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna do the book raffle now. So why don't I do that? And just to let everybody know, this is being recorded. So I am gonna stop the recording now though. And then I will, if anybody wants, I can give them the link to the recording, but, and if anybody emails me, there's somebody who's already asking, I can be sure to get you the link to the recording as well. So I'm going to stop the recording and then we will do the book raffle.